This is Topics in American Literature at Tennessee Tech. My section, 2130-506 for the spring 2022 semester. It is January 10th. It is the first day of the new semester. The keys to success in this class are very simple. You just come to class, do your work, practice academic integrity, which means you just write your own papers. And I really want this class to be fun. I'm going to do my best to have a joyful and exciting and creative time with you all. And I hope you all will seek out some relief from your other hard classes in this course just to have fun. This is a required course at the 2000 level for non-English majors to get a humanities credit in literature. So we're not aspiring American literature scholars or professors. This is the 21st century in the 22nd year, 23rd year, I guess the 23rd year of the 21st century. And our topic is America. You are probably aware that America is a complicated and contested place. You can spend 5 minutes on Twitter and realize that. The texts in this class will speak for themselves, as will I, and you may notice a perspective of sorts will emerge. That is a thesis statement, if you will, on the meaning of America through cultural documents, which sometimes are called literature. You are not required to like or agree with any of the texts that are presented to you this semester. You're not required to like or agree with anything that I present to you this semester. And I will do my absolute best when you produce your own content to be really deeply respectful of your content. Whether I like it or not, I will not evaluate it based on my bias or my preference. I will evaluate it based on your effort and the quality of the contributions that you make. I think everyone here is going to have a lot of fun, but we're going to be getting into some deep topics. One of the deeper topics that we're going to be looking at is the role of race and gender in the production of American culture. And we're going to learn about some things, that maybe are just, not pretty or fun topics. And this is a Topics in American Literature course where I got to choose the topic, and I recognize that gives me a lot of privilege. There are other instructors here that might have chosen baseball and literature, or the Vietnam War and literature, or science fiction and literature. And these are all very legitimate themes that these other professors, and some professors teach this as a survey course. Some professors prefer the classics, which would be like the 19th century, Whitman and Thoreau and Poe and things of this nature, or early 20th century, Great Gatsby and Ernest Hemingway. We're not doing that class, okay? And so I acknowledge that there might be consider this your blanket trigger warning, is what I'm saying, that some of the content you might find problematic or offensive or whatever. And you're responsible for acknowledging the discomfort that you feel, and also just kind of championing yourself and soldiering on. But like I said, once I start unwrapping the package that I have for you this morning, which is the theme of this course, I think you guys are really going to be okay with the theme and find it really, really interesting, and find a lot of ways for yourself to grow and evolve and have a blast in this class. You have 4 major assignments and 2 minor assignments. The 4 major assignments are all due towards the end of the semester, but I will introduce them early in the semester and give you an opportunity to work on them all the semester. Think of these as all of these as kind of culminating and capstone projects. The big thing at the end is you're going to make a mixtape and fanzine on the theme of America that you're going to design a particular focus theme on America that you're going to make. And that is the absolute most fun part of this class. Yes, your final exam is making, a Spotify playlist. Other students have done this before you. They've had a blast. I'll give you some samples to look at. A new assignment this semester is we're going to look at a large body of albums, which would be LPs, long playing cultural production in music, popular music, as kind of poetry, if you will, poetry and art as literature. And we're going to look at those albums, and you're going to write a deep dive on one album of your choosing, and there'll be no repeats among the 35 to 40 of us enrolled in this course. So each class member will have a different LP that they're working on. We'll ease into that assignment, and we'll have a system by which you choose which album that you're doing. We're going to be reading a book of poetry about music, and you're going to write your own poem or poems about music. And we're going to do one brief response to one of the 5 believe it's 5 required textbooks that I put on the syllabus. I wanted to require a lot more, but you guys have a budget and there's time constraints. So some of my friends who are authors, I've got their books. I'm going to introduce you to their books, but I'm not requiring you to buy them. If you went out and bought one of my colleagues' books, that I would be excited, and they would be excited for you to do so. So literature in the classic sense, people have always thought of it as poetry, fiction, novels and short stories, and plays. And when I was trained early on teaching this, you know, a survey course in literature would take, you know, a quarter of the semester on fiction, a quarter of the semester on poetry, a quarter on drama. But really, the way the discipline of literature has evolved and the way the culture has evolved, television, popular television and film, movies, comic books, and popular music all really fit the reasons why we study literature. And so I've expanded our understanding of what literature is to include popular music. But we are going to read a memoir, 2 novels, 3 novels, I'm sorry, works of long fiction, and 1 anthology of poetry. And then we'll be reading some nonfiction essays. And so here's the big deal. This is Mr. Smith's most, I've been living every day up until January 10th, 2022. I've been living up to this day. And I've leaned into this in the past. We've done, you know, Bob Dylan and Marvin Gaye and the Grateful Dead. And we'll talk about that a little bit here in a minute. And I've been doing the mixtape in some form or fashion for several semesters. But this is the first semester where this is the entire theme of the course. America is a mixtape. And let me just tell you, though, briefly, though, the genesis of the mixtape assignment was not me originally. It was a student. They knew that I was a huge music fanboy and that I spent an enormously ridiculous amount of time and money on my own hobby of popular music, collecting and listening and attending concerts and things of this nature. But completely unprompted by me, unsolicited, not, you know, completely as a surprise. And this was in the basic writing class, English, English 10 or 1020 back in the day. The student presents to me a CD at the end of the semester with Sharpie writing on it, and in a nice jewel case, and text that they had written about the songs that they were going to present to me that I'd never heard before, and they wanted me to have this as a gift, this music. All I'm doing here essentially is getting excited about things that have made my life more meaningful. And this is why we are required to take a literature course at the university, is to connect with the culture of America and understand the meaning of the culture of America. So a bachelor degree from Tennessee Tech University says you are a well-rounded individual who has these competencies in a diversity of areas. And academia has always privileged literature and art and humanities because it elevates the meaning of life. But all this is us getting excited about stuff and sharing it with each other. And I know the traditional literature course, it's possible to get excited about that. I know that you have probably, some of you at least, have taken a traditional literature course in high school and gotten excited about it. But I think you're going to have the opportunity, because of the playlist mixtape theme of this course, to get excited about this in ways that you have not before, and that this is going to kind of blow your mind. And so what we've discovered is that you can study the canon, that's the large sweep of American music, popular American music. You can study it as you would a literature object, like a poem or a story, but also recognize that it is a form of literature, because it's what's in the water that we swim in. It's what the air that we breathe. It is our common vintage, our heritage. It's what makes us America in all of the complicated, contested, and creative ways that we are Americans. And so our topic is this geographical place, the United States, this continent of North America, and the creative production of our 240 years or so, however, 245 years of us. couple years ago, I believe it was in 2016, this folk singer, if you know who the folk singer is, drop their name in the chat right now for extra credit right now. First couple of people who dropped his name in the chat, I'll give you some extra credit. This folk singer, does somebody know who this is always the, because you all being Zoomers, this is always the test of, of where we're at. Does anybody want to jump in the chat? Yes, thank you. Okay, we got a point there. Thank you. So in 2016, Robert Zimmerman of Minnesota. Thank you. You guys are good. Okay. All right. No more points now. I got the first two are going to get points. Bob Dylan of Minnesota moved to New York in the early 60s, and everything changed. So about 60 years ago, exactly right now, this Minnesota boy hit the hipster venues of New York City, and the world changed. In 2016, he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature because his poetry made manifest in song. And then last year, a musician and a professor came out with a book called The Poetic Song Verse. And they have now really, because this is a respected academic book on a respected academic press, like none of that should matter to you guys, it matters to me. This is a legitimate genre now of literature. The poetic song verse is a specifically American, but it is a global genre as well. It's definitely a British United Kingdom genre that we will not be looking at the Beatles. I know some of you are like, what, Mr. Smith, how can we not look at the Beatles? Because I would have to do that if in the United Kingdom British lit version of this. And there's 3 2000 level classes here at the university, American, World, and British. Since you're in the American, we're going to focus on United States based work here. But because of Dylan's Nobel Prize, 6 years ago, this is blown. The doors were blown open in the 60s. They were blown open in the 30s. The doors have been open for a while, but this has really just completely put this thing out there that this is possible. And look at, for example, Taylor Swift and her re-release of her All Too Well. Is that the last track on Red, Taylor's version, the 10-minute version that just came out? The significance of that track. Or look at some of the commentaries on America that have been coming out of the hip hop community the last couple of years. The deal has been sealed on this. This is a legitimate art form. This is an art form that defines who we are as Americans. It needs to be studied in this way. And I'm honored that I've had training, from mentors in this, and I have fellow travelers, other kind of, middle-aged, Gen X dad rock types like myself who have made this their life's calling. So what we're going to be doing, what you're going to be doing is going to be creating kind of your own sonic autobiography of your life through music that you pick. And you're going to be doing that by looking at the geography and the musical geography of America, the landscape of America. And we'll be also learning the biographies of some of these people that have made this possible. So the ultimate goal of this class is for us together, but you in particular as the practitioners of this class. And I'm thinking of you guys as my cohort, my collaborators on a project. Think of each of you as kind of more like a TA in a research colloquium than just students in a required class, right? So our job then will be to create particularly American mixtapes to chart our own version of the popular music canon, and then pen poems and lyrics in response to that experience. And so that's what you're going to be doing. You're going to be making this mixtape. You're going to be responding to one album, and you're going to be writing some lyrics or spitting some poetry in that spirit of this as well. Now, I've linked our geography. You will find other geographies. Maybe you're from Georgia. Maybe you're from North Carolina, West Virginia. Maybe you're from San Francisco. But I'm going to particularly at the beginning of our semester ground this experience in 2 very specific geographies of which I feel connected. The first geography to which I feel that we all need to understand is the Mississippi Delta region, where there was a high concentration of enslaved persons of African descent who were brought here in chains and worked for many generations, and then were liberated. But then many of them stayed, and it was in the post-Civil War period in the late 19th, early 20th century that out of this emerged the song verse form in 2 of its primary areas that I believe are kind of the cradle of what today you would call country, rock, and hip hop was the blues and the gospel music that emerges out of the African American experience post Civil War and early 20th century. So we're going to look at that, the Delta as kind of the cradle and the incubator of great American music. But I'm going to trace the lineage. Now, some people went to Memphis, some people went to Chicago, some people went to New York and San Francisco. But there's a lineage of folk who went to Detroit. Why? Because there were jobs. And this is true of rural white working class as well as black working class. So you had a whole exodus of people from Appalachia, black and white, who went to Detroit to build automobiles. And the music and culture that emerged out of Detroit became central to what American music would, Detroit Rock City, Motown. But it's going to go a lot deeper than that, because we're going to have some conversation partners from Detroit this semester that are going to help us unpack that. Because I spent my formative years, my undergraduate years and my high school years in the Motor City, and so it's deeply connected to me. Though I'm a Yankabilly, I'm fully Tennessee, lived here since '96, and I have no plans to leave. So I'm here. I'm a Cookeville man today. I lived in Cookeville now about 13 years, lived over down the valley in Liberty, Tennessee before that. But there's gonna be other geographies that you're gonna talk about, but I'm gonna trace kind of a lineage for us from the Delta to Detroit. Another place we are going to stop off very briefly, just for a hot minute next week, and I'm going to be going through with you all some of the highlights on your day-by-day syllabus. You guys have a copy of this over email, and I would make a copy of that. I'm trying to show it. You can't see it. Anyway, because it has a day-by-day of what's going to be happening in class each day. So we're going to stop off in Grundy County, up on Monteagle Mountain, at the Highlander Folk School, which is now based at the Highlander Center, which is in far east Tennessee, but it was originally up in Grundy County and Monteagle Mountain, where music was part of the civil rights movement. And next week is Martin Luther King Jr.'s week, and so we're going to be on Martin Luther King Jr.'s week next Wednesday. We'll be learning briefly about the Highlander Folk School. I'm going to be bringing in a lot of conversation partners, and if they don't bail on me, we're going to have several guests to be. So it's almost going to be like you guys are, during the lecture portion, you'll be sitting in kind of like a podcast, sort of, that we're making together. And I appreciate you. It's way more interesting to have an audience than just to be kind of shouting at the internet, right? Which I would do that, by the way. Full disclosure, I would shout at the internet anyway, whether there was an audience or not. So appreciate y'all coming along with that. Next, on Friday, I think I got my slides out of order. Yeah, on this Friday, that'll be next Wednesday. On this Friday, on this Wednesday, we're going to look at the book, the Sheffield book, Love Is A Mixtape, which is kind of a grounding out of a very personal grounding of the personal side. There's a lot of cultural sides to this, but there's kind of like a human side to this book, and we're going to find that in the Love Is A Mixtape book by Rob Sheffield, which we're going to look at this Wednesday, coming up on the 12th. So then on this Friday, I'm going to give a lecture I've incorporated in my past classes, and it's continued to evolve. And it has the first playlist I'm going to give you connected with it: blues, gospel, hip hop, and the African American literary experience. We're not going to listen a lot. We'll listen maybe some later, but I can play music through the Google Meeting, but it's just not as good as you guys listening, on your own. But that means you have to make time, right? The one good thing about that is you guys can do that while you're at the gym, while you're doing homework for other classes, while you're traveling down the I-40 or wherever you have to go to get around, going 111 back to Sparta, however you commute. You can listen in the car, you can listen at the gym, you can listen while doing other work. And then this is kind of a new discovery for me, and I'm going to blame these guys for why this class has evolved. And these guys have always been out there, but I realized that for a poet and a DJ who's not himself a musician and doesn't know how to play the guitar, I learned clarinet back in the day. I was a band nerd for like a minute, dropped out of marching band. I also tried sport. I tried everything back in high school. So back in the 20th century, these guys were song hunters and song collectors, and all of the following week, so that'll be on the 24th and the 26th, we're going to learn all about them. I should have a slide in there about Woody Guthrie. I don't, but we're going to learn about Woody Guthrie too. But we're going to learn about Alan Lomax. He's on my right here, and Harry Smith on my left, who created. Harry Smith made the first mixtape, kind of. It was called the Anthology of American Folk Music, and he's become kind of a cult figure. He was an artist and an art collector and a filmmaker. He's the very strange man with the big glasses pouring the milk there on the left. And then Alan Lomax was, through his father, John Lomax, who both came from Texas, worked with the Smithsonian and the Library of Congress, and they just went around the United States collecting music, and they made a humongous impact on America through song collecting and song hunting. And I think really each of us, to really do this class the best that you possibly can, is to think of yourself as a Lomax or a Smith. You are hunting and collecting songs for your possible mixtape. And I don't want you to go just, to your hard drive, and just, what you already have on your workout list or your worship list or whatever. I want you guys to make some new discoveries this semester, or to pick a theme that stretches you a little bit. Don't lean on your past, but lean into your future and make some new discoveries. Have some new epiphanies and some new revelations about America and about your relationship to it through song verse, poetic song verse. I love saying that phrase. I've invited this journalist to come to class. I don't think she's probably going to come. I've actually not met her, but I've read that she's a new mom. But this genre of study that I'm into is a particularly like a lot of dudes, like a lot of guys. I go to the Great Escape or some of these record stores, and you see, a bunch of like, dads and granddads, just thumbing through the crates, just crate digging, And there's something about the vinyl thing that is like a lot of guys are into it. Now, women are getting into it too. I just, matter of fact, found a teenager I know through her mom, bought one of my records. I have a little record crate at the Tiny Cloak. I'm not advertising that you should go buy one of my records, but there is a crate of my records at the Tiny Cloak off the square. And anyway, so I want to highlight this author's great work, Amanda Petrusich. Her book, Do Not Sell at Any Price, The Wild Obsessive Hunt for the World's Rarest 78 RPM Records, as well as her other book, It Still Moves, which is a travel log throughout the South connected to music. But what I really want to use my brief stopover with her work to teach us is that what you love can be what your work is. She became a music critic, a professional music critic, because that's what she loved, right? And a lot of you are in the pursuit of careers here at the university. I hope you're pursuing your calling and you're pursuing that thing that makes you excited and that you love. And that's why I'm teaching this class this way this semester, because this is what I know and this is what I love. This is what is near and dear to my heart. So it's a rock criticism and rock and roll are male-dominated professions, and so I definitely want to give a shout out to some of our great female participants, both on the music side and in the production of good scholarship on this topic. So we'll take a brief stopover on her books on a week from Monday, and if she shows up, I'll have to eat those words because I've sent her out an email and invited her to come. I feel that her book on 78 collecting is really connected to our novel White Tears by Hari Kunzru. This is a really existential crisis for me. This is a United States-based class, everything about this class. And Kunzru is a United Kingdom author of Indian descent, but he is United States-based. And I've decided that, and this book is so American, and it so helps us understand, it helps us wrestle with the paradox of white and black in popular culture and pop music in America. And you can't not wrestle with it, right? And there's so many great things about it because it gives us unity and solidarity in other where it doesn't exist in other parts of our world. Sport has been the same way. Football, for example, and basketball have been this place where we've experienced unity and solidarity where it hasn't existed in other parts of society. But it's also highly contested because the song collector guys were white and some of the music they were collecting was black artists. There's the producers and the promoters. There's a lot of divisiveness and a lot of there's a lot of issues here. And when you read Kunzru, you'll see that basically it's kind of a critique of the white hipster who loves music, black music, but it's a fantasy. It's a historical fantasy / crime. It's wild. I think you'll like it. I loved it. I thought it was an easy read, by the way. and it's weird and fun, and it's a wild ride. I hope you guys really appreciate, maybe not as much as I did, but you'll appreciate this book for everything about it. And it deals with gender and relationships and male insecurity, as it deals with our relationships for straight guys, heterosexual guys, insecurities about relationships with women. We're going to pivot from that to my dear friend Mark Kemp, and he has agreed to come. He's a writer previously for Rolling Stone magazine, Spin magazine, based in North Carolina, and his love book, Dixie Lullaby, is a love song to the South. He's a man of the South, and being from the South is complicated, and he's going to give us a kind of a theory about being a conscious and aware white music fan in the South, dealing with some of the other issues that I've already brought up in terms of our debt that we owe to Black music, specifically to blues and gospel, and then later, of course, hip hop, soul, funk, R&B. From there, we're going to take a brief look at the Allman Brothers, because that is the ultimate, Southern band, right? I mean, you might say Leonard Skinner, I'll say Allman Brothers band, but the Allman Brothers band of the classic rock era is the ultimate Southern rock band from Macon, Georgia. And Duane Allman is part of the 27 Club with Janis Joplin, Amy Winehouse, Jim Morrison, Jimi Hendrix, Robert Johnson, Kurt Cobain of Nirvana, and Duane Allman died in, I believe it was a motorcycle accident right there in Macon, Georgia. And he left a baby girl. And his baby girl grew up to write a book about her dad. And it is one of the most tender and touching biographies I've ever read, music biographies I've ever read. And I'm sorry for not assigning it. I have not invited Galadriel Allman, but that class is coming up in several weeks. Maybe I'll invite her. Maybe she'll come to class, and we'll meet Duane Allman's daughter. If not, you guys should go and get this book. I listened to it on Audible. She reads it to you. Mind-blowingly good book. We're going to take a brief stopover in the Beat Generation, who are a group of poets and writers in the 1950s and going forward to today, who greatly influenced Dylan and the Grateful Dead and the whole 60s phenomenon. And we'll have a couple of brief detours in the 60s. I did mention we'll stop off at Woody Guthrie and a little bit of Lead Belly in there after Harry Smith. So then we'll get into the 60s. I could do a whole class just on the 60s, but we'll look at the Grateful Dead, their great album, American Beauty, and maybe some others. We'll also pivot to what was going on in Motown at the time, which is the great music of Marvin Gaye. And for some reason, I don't know, there's something about the Marvin Gaye. Students love the Marvin Gaye section of the class. His album, What's Going On, from 1971, is one of the great albums of all time and worth looking at. And then once we've landed in Detroit with Marvin Gaye, I'm going to visit with my dear friend Peter Werby on the left, who is an author, journalist, retired radio personality from WRIF. And we'll be reading his novel, Summer on Fire, about the rebellion in Detroit that happened during 1967 and being a radical white hippie in the middle of a black rebellion. And you all lived through the summer of 2020, and so if you were from Minneapolis or Detroit or St. Louis or some of these cities, we had something in Cookeville too, but it was really small. But you would know what the uprisings were like in the summer of 2020. Very controversial text, but you guys, I think, will appreciate somebody who's like your great grandfather, who was like legitimately there. And he's going to join us on one of the calls that week. My dear friend Danny Croha has an album out on Third Man Records called Detroit Blues. Third Man, based out of Nashville, Tennessee. But it's just an old bunch of old blues records, blues songs. But Danny's just going to get on and talk about the Detroit music scene with me for one of our classes. I can't wait to introduce you to Danny. Somewhere in there, we have Sean's going to visit us to talk about his book about the. There's a whole book series called 33 and a Third. I need a slide for Sean, and I've now on my notes here. I don't see what day that is. I need to go back and look at my schedule. I will make sure I correct that and put his day on there. So that's going to happen. Lots of guests. And then winding up kind of the guest portion of it, but maybe not. We'll see how we go towards the end of the semester. At the end of February, we're going to meet M.L. Liebler, who was my college professor. Blame him. When he gets here, you can blame him for this class being the way it is. He was my teacher at Detroit at Wayne State University, where I have the Bachelor of Literature from. And he's got, with his friend Jim Daniels, an anthology of poetry about Detroit music. And that's where we'll introduce the concept of poetry about music. Can't wait to have my former professor join us for the hour. I believe that's going to happen around February the 28th. And what else? We're going to learn about music festivals as a form of utopia and dystopia. And the pictures here are from the Woodstock 99 festival and the Altamont Speedway Festival in California. So that would be 1999 and 1969. But unfortunately, in 2021 in Texas, there was a festival that resulted in crowd control issues and several deaths. And we will connect the present crisis with music festivals. You've seen maybe the Fire Festival documentaries. Those were disasters, but now we've got the pandemic and people trying to gather and have festivals during the pandemic. Then there's the problem of violence. Anyway, there's just all kinds of problems with music festivals. And so we'll look at music festivals as dystopias and utopias simultaneously. And then we'll read a book that's a utopia and dystopia simultaneously, that is prefaced by a pandemic and a terrorist act, and they ban all concerts. And then the pandemic subsides and the terrorism subsides and concerts are still banned, and a small group of music fans get together and start having concerts post-pandemic. This is a fiction book. It's not a document. It sounds a little real there, Mr. A little bit too real with Sarah Pinsker. People have asked about these books in the past. When do I read? You start now and you read as much as you absolutely can. There are no quizzes or exams whatsoever based on content in the books to check whether you've read it or not. So it is completely an honor system. But the more content, including the live stream calls, but the outside of class, the more content that you all consume that's course related, the better class experience you will have. So the more time you allow yourself to read these texts and listen to some of the books and podcasts and playlists that I provide for you, the better of an experience that you all will have. Jeff Tweedy out of Chicago, the great band Wilco, has a memoir he wrote a couple of years ago that only includes one chapter about his recovery from pill addiction. But last semester, I did a whole day on this, on literature and recovery from drug and alcohol addiction. This is a disease that shows no partiality to age, gender, race, or economic class. And I found, at least last year, that a large percentage of our student body either is suffering from one form or another of mental health concerns or addiction-related concerns, or has a family member, a loved one, a sibling, or a parent, or a grandparent, or an aunt or an uncle who struggles with substance abuse disorders. And so this is just one day lecture, but it was extremely meaningful. And the responses I got from the students last semester in all my classes where I brought up this topic they were overwhelmingly positive and encouraging that we need to break through the taboo of talking about this. And so, full disclosure, myself, I am a recovered alcoholic, 12 years, 13, going on 13 years since I last was drinking alcoholically. And I'm a part of a sobriety community. And I encourage anybody who needs help to get help. And if you know anybody, there is a solution. We do recover. So, but that's going to be Jeff Tweedy. What an amazing artist as well. And we'll be learning a little bit more about him then. I'm a theologian as well as a literature scholar. And for my final project for Vanderbilt Divinity School, where I have the Master of Theology Studies, I took a project about Cookeville, about my friends Nelia and Calvin. And they were part of the Wesley Foundation on 9th Street in the late 60s and early 70s. And they were kind of Cookeville Christian hippie flower children. I'm going to tell you their story and talk a little bit about that part of American music. Usually somebody wants to do a religiously themed playlist for their playlist. I encourage you to take a look at the 70s re-CCM scene. It's very different now. Praise and worship music is very, very different genre today than it was in the 60s and 70s, and how the hippie movement inspired contemporary religious movement. Music is very, and it's a very, looking at Larry Norman. Oh, I think he's Canadian. Is he Canadian? I don't know. Anyway, we'll talk about that a little bit more. Definitely looking at, oh, I can't even say his name, Keith Green, so many others. But anyway, they were more beatniks. They were listening to Bob Dylan and reading Lawrence Fairley Getty poems and playing Bob Dylan songs and reading Lawrence Fairley Getty songs in Christian liturgy right there on 9th Street at the Wesley Foundation. Go meet Addison, their current minister, and he can tell you all about it. It's an incredible story, and I'll share just a small portion of that story with you guys. So you're going to be making your American mixtape. It's our American mixtape. We're going to be making them together. We'll be comparing notes. We'll each be writing about one influential American album, and it's going to be it's just going to be an amazing time. You guys are ready to start listening, start reading, and don't forget the class survey learning contract on this coming Wednesday, which is the 12th of January. We will be devoting the entire day to the Rob Sheffield book, Love Is A Mixtape. I will not have a prepared lecture. I'll be reading and talking from the book itself. I encourage you, if you have already got the book, to bring it to class with you on this Wednesday. So welcome to America as a Mixtape. Sean Maloney, I met at MTSU in the Zeros, worked for the Nashville scene as a music critic, lives in the Northeast now in the Boston area, has a book about Jonathan Richman. It's part of the 33 1/3 series. So the 33 1/3 series are books devoted to just one album. Your essay, which is only about a 1,200 to 2,000 word essay, is your short version of that. It's a commentary on one musical document. So I'm going to bring Sean in to talk about his book and the book series itself and why it's important that we care about albums. And he's just a fun and amazing person, and I'm just really grateful to be bringing him in there. And I think he must be on the 11th, and I for some reason have a blank there. I will double check my notes to make sure. I don't want to have somebody come on the class for free and then forget which day. I should have stopped recording this while I confess my sins. I'm going to do that right now. Stop recording. No, I stopped sharing. How about stop recording? Thank you all so much.